All right, welcome back to another episode of Wild Medicine. I am your host, Dr. Michelle Peris, and this week on the podcast, we have Paul Lillakas. Look, I cannot believe it's taking me this long to do an episode like this because this was one of the funnest, most helpful episodes I've done in a really long time. You know, being that this is a health meets wild living podcast, we talk a lot about the science behind a lot of what we do and nourishment, but never have we had someone on to talk about like how do we make our food taste good. Now, I'm really blessed to actually know Paul. He is amazing. You guys are going to love his energy. He adds, beyond his wealth of knowledge, he adds enthusiasm into everything he does. Like, this is a really, really fun episode, and he's a really enjoyable human. If you don't know Paul, he is a Canadian private chef, content producer, content consultant, recipe developer, writer, media personality. You might know him from being a TV chef. He was the Chopped Canada champion. He was the former food editor of Canadian Living magazine and the former personal chef to Canadian DJ deadmau5. He's awesome. And we have a really fun conversation around how to make a protein-focused meal taste delicious. I talk a lot about protein. I talk about it all day in my office. Most people know how much, at least in my world, most patients know how much they need to be consuming in order to build muscle and maintain their current muscle mass and age well and protect their brain and all the things. But I have not been the best at helping people ensure that it tastes good when they consume it. And this episode is all about that. We have a really fun conversation about what to do in the kitchen, what simple seasonings are going to infuse life to your plate and make everything taste amazing. We talk about what kitchen gadgets, if you will, are an absolute essential for healthy, nourishing, and delicious meals. This was a really fun conversation. I actually could have talked to him for much longer, and it was an incredible resource. When I say that I will be telling every patient about this episode and to go listen to it to make sure that their high protein centric meals taste good, it is an understatement. This is a really fun and informative and useful episode. So without further ado, I welcome Paul Lillakas to the podcast. All right, Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I am honored to have you on here. You're a really big deal. For those who don't know you, you won Chopped Canada. You're the food editor for Canadian Living magazine. You were the personal chef to deadmau5, which I had to look that up because I was like, how do I properly say that? Even though I knew it, double yourself, because it's written funny. But like how I have come to know you and really appreciate your genius is that we were lucky enough through, friends and family connections to have you nourish us at a retreat we hosted. And you made that event. I think everyone felt so celebrated and appreciated and spoiled because of the quality of food that was made for us. And I know that was a once in a lifetime opportunity, but we are so, so grateful that we had you. So before we get into a conversation around food, can you introduce yourself and let us know how you got to be where you are today?
Well, thank you. Wow, geez, that's such a nice introduction. So I've been working in the food world in one way or another. It kind of like slapped me in the face this morning for 20 years because my first kitchen job was when I was 16. It was at a Pizza Hut, and now I'm 36. And I've kind of I've had all sorts of jobs throughout my working life and my career, but always there's been an anchor point, which has always seemingly been food in one way or another. And I've really tried to bounce around and learn all that I can from a variety of different points within the industry, not just in the kitchen, but also in food marketing, in recipe writing, in journalism, in storytelling. I worked as a private chef, as you mentioned, for many years, and I worked in a butcher shop. I worked in restaurants more briefly than anything else because I worked more predominantly in private events, catering, private chefing. And now, as of about 6 or 7 years ago, I became a freelancer after I worked at Canadian Living as the food editor. So I was literally writing recipes in the test kitchen. My desk was in the test kitchen. My keyboard was covered in flour. It was a very dynamic and demanding, but interesting, wonderful job. And then after I left Canadian living, I decided to become a freelancer. So now I can sort of work many pots, to use a cooking metaphor. I can juggle a lot of different things and enjoy the variety that comes from a freelance career. So one day I'm a recipe developer for a food brand. The next day I am bringing that recipe to life on a Canadian television show, or I'm doing the food photography so that can be brought to life in print publication, or I'm traveling, bringing the story of a culinary destination to readers, and so on and so forth. And my career just kind of keeps, I want to say, mushroom clouding in a way, but that's not a very good example. It's a very winding road full of interesting experiences, and I get bored very easily. So I really like the adventure of not knowing what's next for me.
I love that, because I can relate to that sort of letting life unfold and see what beautiful opportunities come. You've been in the food industry for a really long time, and you've created an incredible career. And, from the lens that I come from in terms of wanting women to nourish themselves from a healthy perspective, I think a big piece of why there can be a more challenging buy-in or we feel really overwhelmed is that the food that we are cooking is sort of lackluster and not that delicious. And so what I can say, and I've personally experienced with your menu, is that your food is outrageously good. And we served meals that were whole food and clean and nourishing and protein focused. And so I wanted this opportunity to pick your brain as a chef on how do we meld these two worlds together? I think many are much more equipped and informed on the importance of needing to eat well and protein focused. How do we make that taste good? Like, what are we doing? What do we need to stock in our kitchen? How do we need to prepare ourselves in order to be able to do this effectively? I'm going to say this as an aside. Just started a year ago, I started making sourdough and realized how intimidating this was to a lot of people. And then talking through this myself, I found myself teaching a sourdough workshop, which is hilarious. But neither here nor there, I have my own clinic and I can just run events. So decided I did it. But you see, it's like the timing that's intimidating to people. It's like what kind of prep work needs to happen in order to make this successful? And I think it's the same thing with whole nutritious food tasting good. It's like, how even to be so audacious to be like, how are you doing this in your own home? Like, what does one do to make sure that we can make this really essential part of our health plan? We all have to eat. How do we make it taste good? I said a lot there and I'm so sorry.
Well, no, but I think that it's true though. Like the same thing that makes, making sourdough intimidating is the same thing that makes cooking in general intimidating. It's controlling the conditions, and trying to do it all in the time that you have, because ultimately cooking is just the effect of time and temperature. And you're just trying to find the right balance to cook things to their optimal doneness, whatever that means to you, whether that's vegetables, whether that's meats, whether it's baking, all of it. So, that's what makes people quite intimidated to step into the kitchen. And I think that often, just like I had mentioned before when we were chatting, I think that the fear is the worst part. It's like over analysis of something is way worse than actually doing it. It's like once you're actually doing it, you have to figure it out. It's not as bad as if you big something up in your mind. And so I think that first and foremost, the important thing is for people to get in the kitchen and actually get their hands dirty and touch the food and get to know it and taste it before you cook it. Well, not raw meat, for example, but, vegetables, for example. People often just cook something the same way that they saw it done once. They don't even taste as they go. But there's something very inspiring about the Alice Waters sort of, way of cooking. Alice Waters is a very famous American chef who kind of pioneered the farm to table movement. And he just says, encourage you. She's sweet as pie. And she's just wonderful and inspiring. And she says, I encourage you to go to the farmer's market, buy whatever's fresh, take it home, slice it and taste it. And that's the beginning of the principle to her kind of cooking, or her philosophy of cooking. And it couldn't be more true, get to understand what things taste like in their raw form if you can, and then do as little as possible to them, but with care. So I think that really when it comes to cooking, it's, It's not overcooking things, and then it's seasoning them appropriately. And we can go deeper into both those things.
Okay. I love where we're going with this, because I can really relate to a couple of things that you said, and I want to highlight. It sounds like what we've forgotten is the idea of play in the kitchen, of like having fun. It all got so serious.
Yeah.
I am in that category. 4:00 hits every day, and I'm like, oh no, it's that time again. It's like this daunting, what will you serve? And it's lost its play. And to just highlight what you said from a farm to table perspective, and this love of food and being creative in that sense. And sourdough became that for me. It was like this creative pursuit that at least had some return on investment for me, more than a puzzle or a painting. It was like things I could actually gift to people and nourish people, and it was super rewarding. Similar to having a garden and watching it grow and watching your veggies and feeling deeply connected. And like they're like babies. I'm like singing to them, watering them, like the whole process of that kind of farm to table, which we seem to have really become disconnected from, is, I think, something we're all craving. So I love that that's the angle that you're coming at, is like breathing in this part, because I realized that my kids were far more open to tasting things when they saw it grow and you watch it come to fruition. Same if you're going to a farmer's market and you're buying fresh food and you're like, I've never tried this before, but I feel drawn to pick it because it's purple or yellow or green or whatever. And to start there. So yeah, let's go both those avenues, because I will say, when it comes to flavors and seasonings, I know nothing, and I would love to learn from you. So let's go there first.
Certainly. Well, I think generally speaking, I mean, I have a lot. If you were to open up my cupboards, it's like an explosion of different ingredients, which most people don't need and don't have. Two of the main things that I will start with are, because obviously we could talk about spices and dried herbs and things for days. But fundamentally, two of the things that people do the worst or make the largest mistakes with in terms of seasoning are salt and pepper, and just the quantity. Unless you're on a low sodium diet, or you're avoiding sodium for health reasons, people tend to be really afraid to over season with salt. And it can really make the difference. Even just an additional sprinkle of salt can really make the difference between something being mediocre and extraordinary. So, for example, a chicken breast with skin on, roasted in the oven. It really needs nothing more than a little olive oil, salt, and pepper to be fantastic. But it can really, I hate to say this, it can really suck if it's under-seasoned, and it can be extraordinary if it's seasoned really well. Another thing, that using that chicken breast as an example, seasoning it ahead of time, seasoning it an hour before you roast it, and then patting it dry to remove a little bit of the liquid on the outside, it allows the seasoning to penetrate the meat a little bit, and it also dries out the exterior, so you get a nicer, more appealing, more flavorful browning on the outside as it roasts. That's just like one little change that you can make that makes a huge difference in the finished product. Now, if you are seeking a lower sodium diet, there are all kinds of other ways that you can season, and one of the most underutilized seasonings is acid. So any types of vinegar. There are fruit vinegars that are fantastic. There are, everybody's familiar with balsamic vinegar, but there are all kinds of different varieties of balsamic vinegar used for different reasons. And then the world's your oyster with citrus juice, with just other tart juices. Okay, here's a great example. Especially if you're not exclusive to low sodium diets, but especially if you're trying to cut the salt out and you're thinking, oh, my food's really bland, take a tray of roasted roots, for example. Like, one of my favorite things to do in the winter is just a medley of roasted roots. So let's say you've got beets, parsnips, carrots, maybe some sweet potato and some red onion, all just cut into chunks, about same size, tossed with some olive oil, salt, and pepper in the oven, high oven, for about maybe 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about 35, 40 minutes until they're nice and caramelized on the outside. As soon as it comes sizzling out of the oven, I'll hit it with just a little dash of like raspberry vinegar on the outside, or even a balsamic vinegar or an apple cider vinegar, whatever you have. I like the ones that are made from fruits and berries because they have a little more sugar in them, but that will sort of deglaze the pan. I toss those around and it adds a layer of acidity that doesn't taste like vinegar when you end up, because they're still really hot. That vinegar kind of cooks a little bit and mixes with the juices on the pan and that have come from those roots. And what you end up with is just these bites that, as people are eating them, they're noticing that there's something different about these. There's something special about these. And it's just that simple, like a dash of some kind of flavorful vinegar at the end mixed up. And that's just one example of how it can make such a big difference. Sometimes really decent cooking is just missing a light layer of acidity to brighten it up.
Okay, I love this. First of all, I want to love food the way you do. And so that's so interesting. I think I make mediocre meals and I'm probably like this close to making it extraordinary. Okay, so vinegars, really playing with salt. Is there other things like that that are helpful for people? Because this is, why didn't we do this sooner? This is like, people are going to love that.
Well, certainly there are all kinds of other, like, okay, so if you think of vinegars as a condiment, as a seasoning, or as a seasoning rather, you can think of other condiments as seasoning as well. Think about, okay, so I lost a lot of weight when I was 21. I believe I was 21. In 1 year, I lost about 75 pounds. This was at a time when I was really not looking after myself very well. I was just coming out of college, eating a lot of pizza, drinking a lot of beer, not a lot of disposable income. And I was cooking for other people, not really for myself much. And I made a huge change that year. I kind of got to a point where I was like, okay, enough is enough. And I really started to take control of what I was eating at home. And one of the things that really sticks out in my mind from that was a long time ago now, that was like 15 years ago now. But one of the things that really sticks out to me was that I became obsessed with different mustards, because mustards are flavorful. They are 0-calorie condiments that also bring spice and acidity. So I would use mustards to season all sorts of things. Then sometimes I would steam an artichoke and I would just eat it with mustard as a snack, as like a low-calorie but satisfying snack. And I would make mustard glazes for fish, and I would make roasted roots and dip them in mustard instead of like a heavier, mayo-based dip or something. The things that we as a society are very used to eating.
Sure.
But man, mustard is another great example of something that can really elevate your cooking, and keep it quite nutritious. And so, yeah, I even make mustard at home that's my sourdough right now.
Really?
is aging mustards in my fridge. Yeah.
Is it easy?
Yeah, literally mustard is simply mustard seeds. Okay, grainy mustard is just mustard seeds. I toast some of them. I mix them with vinegar and sea salt, leave them at room temperature covered for 48 hours. It just looks like mustard seeds in water at that time. So you're like, this is never going to change. But sure enough, it starts to thicken. And then you can either blend it to make it sort of like a crunchy mustard. You can blend it to make it smooth if you want in like a Vitamix, but I like it sort of like just kind of chunky. And then I'll flavor mine with soy sauce a little bit, garlic, maple, whatever. You can go like the sky's the limit with flavorings. And then you just put it in the fridge and then you age it for about a month. Because if you try to eat it right away, it's quite bitter. But over that month, those bitter notes just kind of go away and it becomes this delicious mustard. And it's like a fun DIY as well. And again, that's just one little thing that I use for all kinds of, in all kinds of different ways in the kitchen.
Well, this is the thing. I think, like we're just not leveraging these very simple things that, like, to your point, like mustards are things that we have in our fridge. Vinegars are things that we have in our pantry. Like, it's there. No one taught us what to do with these things. And so we'll deal with mediocre food and then got super attracted to the hyper palatable foods because it just like simply tastes better than what you're making at home, so that you can see how this could happen. That's very cool. I want to try that. Are there top principles that you have for building your plate at home that help you accomplish health goals or what your overall goals are and honor this joy of eating? And I literally think you are like the most joyous person about food. Like, it's so refreshing.
Food does make me joyous, and sharing food does bring me and others joy. And it's like one of those things that, like, especially at a time like this, if there's one thing we can all agree on, it's a need to eat and a need to nourish ourselves and a desire to eat delicious food. It's kind of a great equalizer. And so I think the more we talk about it and connect, the better.
This episode is brought to you by the Poppy Clinic. If you're looking for an integrative approach, our team of naturopathic doctors is there to support you every step of the way. Whether you're looking to learn more about period literacy or hormone balance for your tweens and teens, or you're looking to optimize fertility during that perinatal and postpartum phase. Or maybe you're at the phase where you want to start having a conversation around perimenopause and menopause, or even metabolic health. We have a naturopathic doctor for you, providing support with menopause hormone therapy, labs, an integrative, customized approach, talking about nutrition and movement, and even IV vitamin therapy. There is something here for you. So if you're looking for a more in-depth conversation, individualized approach, health education and empowerment, the Poppy Clinic is here for you. If you want to go learn more, check us out at Poppy Clinic.
I think to answer your question, well, let me start here. This is kind of part of something I wanted to say for the last question, but also applies to this. Overcooking, when it comes to proteins, is one of the single biggest issues people have, and one of the reasons why they feel their home cooking is inadequate. It's just a real shame that there's such an amount of fear involved in cooking, or already sort of built into people's sort of sense of confidence in the kitchen. It keeps them from cooking to an optimal temperature, because often it's related to what they were taught as kids, sort of misinformed, by the way, regarding food safety. And so I grew up eating a ton of very gray, overcooked pork, for example, and chicken, because my grandparents and my parents were really afraid of, obviously, like, they didn't want to give us food poisoning. So you better cook that until it's cooked and there's no chance you'll get sick. And then I'm like, bring on the gravy. And I became gravy obsessed and sauce obsessed, because it was, in hindsight, I was using it. It's full of fat, salt, sugar, MSG, all the things that are addictive. But also it was just a way to actually be able to eat this overcooked meat. And so now as an adult, I've made it my mission to sort of like convert my whole family and anybody else that will listen to me into properly cooking to food according to food safety standards, but using an instant probe thermometer. It's like I should have an Amazon affiliate account if I was smarter, if I was better at business, because of the amount of these $25 instant read magnets stick on your fridge probe thermometers that you can take to the grill. So you never have to worry about steaks and overcooking those, or chicken or fish. All these things, all these very sensitive proteins that are expensive, by the way, that people are routinely overcooking. It's such a shame. It's such a shame. And then people think, but I don't know what the temperature is that this is supposed to be cooked to. And I said, do you not have this phone in your pocket? You can look it up right now. You could ask your smart home, or you can ask the phone, and it will tell you right to your ears. At this point, there's no excuse. It's just people haven't gotten used to it. They haven't trained themselves to use these tools. And really, these tools, between the phone that you have and having a meat thermometer at a good one, like a one that instantly reads, you could hugely improve your cooking, hugely improve it.
It's so yeah. Oh, sorry. Keep going. Sorry.
No, that's it.
No, I think that's genius, because my husband was big on an instant thermometer, and someone gifted him one because I obviously didn't prioritize it. But when I started sourdough baking and you weighed everything on scales for your recipes, all your recipes always worked. So then I started really relying on a food scale for everything, because it was you don't even have to think about it, and it turns out great. So it's very similar. And I, funny enough, just made my first roast and totally ruined it because I misunderstood the recipe and I overcooked it. And I don't like overcooked meat. That's hilarious about the gravy, because I did the same thing as a kid. I think this has been a big one for me. When I was so burnt out and I gained weight and all these things, I was like, what happened? And then when I started weighing my food, I was like, this shouldn't have shocked me at all. I know exactly what happened. Sometimes we act mystified and all we need is information. And so I think what you're saying is a really powerful aspect of it, is that I do use his instant thermometer for everything now. And what a game changer. It really does make such a difference when you can trust that it's enough. Because you're right, if we're eyeballing it or cutting it with a knife still and looking in the middle for pinkness for your chicken, it's probably way overcooked in the sense in flavor, right? We don't have to overcook this.
No, and it's so we have this great technology and it's only getting better. Why not use it versus these antiquated methods of cooking. It's like, I remember when I was working at Canadian Living, we were sort of, because we had like 40 years worth of recipes from their whole history that we would draw from, sometimes like we need to make edits on. And some of the old ways of describing, so recipes have a very strict way of, well, or they should. Now they're being a little bastardized, but like in the Canadian Living format, recipe writing is a craft, and it's really an instructional, it's a piece of instructional literature that is supposed to be written so that it's easily understandable by many different sensory cues, auditory cues, visual cues, olfactory, like smell cues. Yeah, you're basically like watching and smelling and hearing. And anyway, so I remember reading some of these old, like, chicken, for example. Chicken was like enemy number one, right, when it comes to food safety. And there were some of these old recipes would say like, cook chicken flipping until, this is before any like temperatures were included, cook chicken flipping occasionally until juices run clear when pierced with a fork. And I'm just like, oh my God, like when clear juices burst forth from where you've pricked it. I'm like, that is so confusing. Like, no wonder people are like, I'll just cook it for another 5 minutes.
Was there no juices in there? Like,
yeah.
Very confusing. Who can use that?
I don't, nobody. And so it's just like, you're right. It became like, well, I'll just slice this and see if it's pink still. But then the other principle of, residual cooking, like that's something that is not really considered when you're slicing this thing that came right off the grill. Like, for example, when I cook chicken breast, so let's use chicken breast as a great example. People love it, especially people who are looking for lean protein. It's so often overcooked. And when it is really hard to swallow. Add more ranch, but you don't have to. So when one of my favorite ways to grill chicken breasts is to take them. So chicken breasts have an odd shape, right? That teardrop shape. The tapered end is obviously going to cook much more quickly than the thick end, but people routinely just throw these things on the grill, flip. Even if they're using a meat thermometer, like parts of it will be very dry if the middle is cooked properly or the wider end is cooked properly. What I do is I take these chicken breasts, pound them lightly, just until they flatten, not to the point of being like chicken parm or schnitzel, but just so they're about an equal width. So from, let's say, an inch or an inch and a half in the thick part down to about the same width, it widens a little bit. And then my like go-to is a teaspoon and a half of sea salt for 4 large breasts, marinated for an hour with mustard, thyme, garlic, whatever you want, and then grilled until 155 Fahrenheit. So 165 Fahrenheit would be your standard, food safety guide done this temperature. But you pull these things off at 155 and you just sort of cluster them together. I bring a sheet pan to the grill. You cluster them together and leave them on your stove. You don't have to cover them, but you could. They'll be 165 in 10 minutes. They'll all be food safe and they will all slice beautifully. They will be perfectly cooked, like not a modicum of dryness. And it's such a nice thing to serve people because people are so used to their chicken breast being dry.
Yeah, I can go in or out with chickens.
Yeah, that's it. It's just like little things, these little changes that you can make to really maximize or optimize your cooking.
Well, it's funny because you're speaking right to me because you're right. Like I've been using it more. My family's all eating really high protein these days. So we're cooking a ton of animal protein. And so we just keep it going. And so I'm using the thermometer in the thickest part of the chicken. And I've had those thoughts like, over here, I know it's going to be stinking hot. So just to even that simple solution, that makes a world of difference because I want to like chicken more, but often it tastes or it's so hard to chew that I can't do it. I'd way rather eat beef because I feel like at least it's an easier meat maybe to consume, like to cook. So it tastes better.
Right. But it's also it's like so easy to make chicken work for you by just trying these little things. And, one of the other reasons why I really like an instant digital probe thermometer is because it's very sharp and strong. So sometimes if I'm cooking, like I have cooked chicken like for an hour and a half straight for like 150 people because I work at a kids camp. I volunteer at a kids camp in the summer. And sometimes it'll be like this grill that is like the size of your dining room table. And so you're working a lot of different pieces at the same time. And I'm just using this as an example because sometimes people get overwhelmed with like, okay, I've got like 8 chicken breasts on the grill here and I like forgot which one I put on first or like what's going on here. I will usually like put things on in a bit of like a clockwise way to remember like where like 12 o'clock is and which ones went on first and sort of rotate that way. But also I'll use the probe thermometer to constantly take temperature of the different pieces, no matter what the protein is. And then if it's done, I'll literally just lick it off the grill with that meat thermometer like it's a skewer and throw it into my pan where it's going to rest. So that I'm not like, it's done. Now I got to switch hands to my tongs to get this thing off. It kind of acts as your tool to remove it at the same time as you're taking it. So like by doing that, again, you're like optimizing your cooking, you're eliminating unnecessary steps. And in other words, you're just staying more focused and staying more on top of it in the process. So, and actually one other thing I wanted to mention regarding other animal proteins that, taper off and are different shapes. Pork tenderloin is an example of something that tapers off at the end and people like to grill those whole. I'll just slice the tapered ends off. So basically you've got like one little roast that is the same size and then you've got your end pieces. And you can cook those end pieces. You marinate them the same way. You season them the same way. You just cook those a couple minutes less, pull those off first, and then you have pieces that are not overcooked that otherwise would be by the simple action of removing them ahead of time and treating them just a little differently.
I love that. How long do you take to prepare dinner? What's your prep look like?
It really depends on the dinner. It really depends on what's cooking that day. If I'm cooking a quick and easy dinner, okay, for example, if I'm making grilled chicken and grilled veggies, I love grilling because it's like, talk about optimizing your cooking when you can do everything in the same place, plus be outside, plus grilled food tastes amazing. I can make like a chicken and like 4 veggie dinner in like 30 to 45 minutes. It's probably faster if I rush, but if it's a more like a normal, like leisurely speed, sometimes I'll take like 4 different veggies and just like toss those in olive oil, whatever seasonings, and then I'll grill those while I'm grilling my meat. But then I'll sometimes make like I made like a roasted mushroom lasagna the other day that I probably spent 3 hours making because I made the cheese fresh and I made the mushroom mixture and I made the pasta from scratch. And that was a Saturday activity.
Did it taste amazing?
Oh my God, it was so good. It was so good. And as I actually froze some because it was just me and my husband. And I'm like, we can't be the only ones that try this. Like, I won't let you eat all of this away. I want to save this for like a dinner party. So I got half of it in my freezer because that's not the kind of thing that I would make often.
Right. Ugh.
But it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Fresh pasta is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So do you have a KitchenAid adapter? Is that what you're using? Okay. I want to get into that next. That's my next.
It's great. It's a lot easier than making sourdough.
Okay. That's good to know. I can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So do you batch cook? Like, do you prep stuff for the week if you've got a busy week?
Yeah.
What do you do? How does Paul handle this?
So I am a huge advocate for batch cooking, not only because it saves you time, but it saves you money buying expensive things like animal protein, for example, in bulk. So one of my favorite things to do is I'll buy a boneless pork shoulder because pork is a very affordable protein. I will season the heck out of it. I'm talking like, this is like an 8-pound piece and I'll season it very liberally and I will put it into a Dutch oven, fairly large Dutch oven, which is one of the most, once you get used to using it, one of the most wonderful cooking tools ever. I'll lay it on top of some thickly sliced sweet onions, just to sort of elevate from the bottom. And I'm talking, when I season this thing, I'm not adding oil. I'm just using sometimes I'll use like a seasoning mix that I like. I have like a bunch of different kinds that are kind of like seasoned salt, but they all different in their own way. So you find the ones that like work for you. Some of them are sweeter, some of them are smokier, but like if it's a blend that is really just like speaks to you, is the right amount, the right balance for you, like you can buy large containers of it for, dollars, and it cuts the time of you having to like a little of this and a little of that and put as romantic as that kind of cooking is. If you're just looking for this thing to be seasoned, have some smokiness, have some flavor, have some salt, a little bit of a little sugar, and maybe a little bit of heat, you're really good with that. So I will use let's say 3 tablespoons of that on an 8-pound roast, stick it on top of these onions, throw in a cup of liquid. It could just be tap water, Like it doesn't have to be apple juice. You know what I mean? Like buy these recipes that are like, add 1 cup of apple juice. And then I'm like, yeah, right.
Yes.
Like you're going to know there's apple juice in there at the end. You're not. You're going to know if there's not enough salt. And then I will put the lid on and I will roast it for 4 hours at 350. And you end up with this huge amount of slow cooked pork, and the onions just turn to butter and those mix into it. And that will make like 3 large dinners. And that piece of pork costs like $25. So you break that down. It's like, I was not a math major, like just over $8 a meal, right? For like easily 4 people.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And I will freeze that. So if I'm at the store, let's say, and I see these, and sometimes they'll go on sale, and I see these large pork, the boneless pork shoulders. It doesn't have to be boneless. Bone-in is fine too. You just won't get as much, obviously, like yield on your meat. I'm gonna buy one if I'm doing nothing with the oven that day, because it's like takes 5 minutes to put this thing in the Dutch oven, throw it in the oven, set the timer for 4 hours, go about your day, take it out, let it cool, and then you could just make 3 huge freezer packs of this ready to go meat that then can be used for really quick weeknight dinners. And it can be tacos. It can be made into nachos. You can make it into a very quick lasagna. Instead of ground beef, you could just put shreds of pork in. I like to make a pulled pork lasagna sometimes where I mix tomato sauce and just a little bit of barbecue sauce. It gives it that sort of like smokiness, and then layer in a bunch of peppers and onions and whatever other veggies you like. And like, it's a huge hit. Like kids love that one. And you can make soup with this pork. You can put it into dumplings. You can make sandwiches with it. You could do there's so many things you can do with it. It's not just like pulled pork sandwiches, like shredded pork. You could just serve it on top of a barley risotto, which is something that I'm recently into, like a toasted barley risotto, just as the meat on top of that with mushrooms and thyme and onions. And yeah.
I love that. That sounds very easy. And when I ran my sourdough class, because that's what I do these days, very Dutch oven, which I thought was interesting. Now, my husband is more into cooking and does similar things to you, which is great. I'm benefiting from this. But what else are you cooking in a Dutch oven? Because now there's a lot more of my community that's investing for the sourdough purposes. But what else are you doing in a Dutch oven? Because I think I'm underutilizing this. And do you use now I could pick your brain all day and I won't, I promise. But other gadgets like Actifries, Instant Pot, slow cookers, like what are essentials in your kitchen?
So to answer you on the Dutch oven question, anything braised, of course, anything that is slow cooked with liquid is great in a Dutch oven, because the weight of the lid and just the way that it conducts heat get the best. You get browning, even though it's like sealed in there, which that's one of the most unique parts of it, because most times when you just put in a piece of meat or anything or vegetable, anything, and it's just steaming in there, like a sourdough before you take the lid off, it's very anemic. It's very white. It usually doesn't have a lot of flavor yet because it hasn't had time to crust. Well, in the Dutch oven, like a braised lamb shanks, for example, or short ribs or pork or stew or whatever, it has this magical ability to still get color, really nice color on that top layer while really cooking food in a quick way. Like it's the next fastest way to slow cook meat to a pressure cooker, which I don't really use. I only make braised meats when I know that I have 4 hours, let's say. Like, I'm not like, oh, gotta go. I'm making short ribs on a Tuesday. Like, I just think that would be bad plan. While I understand the gadgety appeal of it. And like my grandmother had one, of course, and I know people go nuts for their Instant Pots. I tested Instant Pots for way longer than I ever want to again when I was in the Canadian Living Test Kitchen, because that was right around the time they were hitting the market. And I was just like, you know what? To be honest, like they're too small. And I know there's a large one, but even that's too small for me. When I'm cooking, and this is also because I come from a food service background, like the idea of putting all this effort into, I want leftovers. Like I want lots of leftovers. So I'm never making like a one night amount of something unless it's for a party. And then it's already a batch. It's just for that night. So like, I don't really use Instant Pots. I have lots of gadgets, some of which people probably wouldn't resonate with your everyday home cooks. Like I have 4 immersion circulators, and immersion circulators. I have, of course, a Vitamix that is I couldn't say enough good things about it. It's just like, I actually have a Vitamix And then I have another Vitamix downstairs in a box ready for when this one, because this one is over its warranty. For the day that this one stops working, I'm literally going to give it a little like culinary funeral and then pull the new one out because that's how much I use that. That's next to my stove, probably next to my stove. I was going to say and my grill, but probably I use my Vitamix more than I use my grill.
Yeah, I feel similar. Mine's very old and I have not bought the backup, but I've looked at it. I'm like, any day now. And I can't.
Yeah.
My funny about the Vitamix, I didn't want to invest in it originally. My sister moved to Europe and they wouldn't guarantee her warranty. So she left it with me for the few years that she was gone. And then when she took it back, I went maybe 3 days and I was like, we need to buy one immediately. Like they are absolutely essential. So I feel you on that. Are you grilling in the winter?
Yeah. I grill in the winter, not as often, but it's like one of those ways to like beat the winter blues for me. Like even just the smell of the grill and then the smell of the grilled food in the house, kind of like I have a very like visceral, memory rooted reaction when I smell that. Like it reminds me of being a kid and you know summer's coming when you start to smell in the air people's grills coming on. Like, so for me, I mean, I love to grill. Like cooking over fire is my happiest place to cook. I've often said if I was ever going to go back into the kitchen full time, it would be, or have a restaurant, it would be where I have a wood fire grill and I'm just working that grill with the best ingredients that I can possibly find.
I love that.
Yeah. Grilling is awesome. The only problem is like it grilling in the really cold winter, it is different than grilling in the summer. Like it really does change the way that your food reacts out there. Like it's not as simple as like, oh, well, like buck up, you know, get out there. We're Canadians and like, it'll be fine. It's like, well, no, like you have to preheat the heck out of your grill. And then as soon as you open that lid, you're losing way more heat than you normally would in the summer.
Right.
So your food is not going to cook in quite the same way. And so for people who are, again, for those people who are like, I'm going to use my stepdad as an example, the one who we are actually connected through. God, man, it's been a slog trying to get him on the meat thermometer train because for years it was just like, oh, who needs it? You know, 3 minutes a side or 10 minutes a pound. And I'm like, sure, whatever you say. Like, never mind the fact that all of our cooking tools are all different companies and heat at different levels and are made of different materials and all that stuff, like all those variables. Anyway, he used to have these Post-it notes that were like, steak, tenderloin, 7 minutes, then turn 6 minutes. And I'd just be like, does it even say like how thick they are or whatever? And if he tried to do that formula, he had fancied himself like he had like cracked the steak code, that if he tried to do that in the winter versus in the summer, it would be completely different. It's just, it's such a pet peeve because I'm like, use the damn tool. It's so easy.
We're so funny. There's this funny story that Joel Osteen talks about where, you know, intergenerationally people cut the ends off of their roast to, you know, into the ham. And they ask his wife, why do you do that? She's like, well, my mother did it. And they ask the mother, why did you do it? And they ask the grandmother. She's like, because my roast didn't fit in the pan. It's like, do we just like adopt, like that was my cooking methodology for chicken. It's like, that's what I saw my parents do. Like flippity flip, you know, cut it open.
Yeah.
The tubing. My husband laughs because if my family's eating around his dinner table and he does everything by thermometer, they're assessing some of his chicken or turkey. And it just makes him insane because he's like, I'm not going to hurt you. I've done this, but it's like, how do we get out of this rigid, funny Post-it way?
Oh man.
Things.
Yeah. And to be honest, my background as a chef gives me like a slight leg up on those awkward moments because I've seen them happen.
Yeah.
And like I've seen like 6 moms volunteer in a camp kitchen, all with a different way of doing things. And then they'll be bickering about it. And I'll be like, ladies, we're going to have to we're just going to do it this way. And then luckily they'll be like, okay, if you say so. And then they'll kind of be like,
You're the
my house.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I know how tenuous it can be when literally different cooks in the kitchen. It's like, that's not the way my mom did it, or that's not the way my grandma cut those. It's like, good God, like, as long as it tastes good and we're all safe.
Yeah, that is a funny thing that we laugh about after. He's like, why does your family always, but it's a thing. It's a very, very funny thing.
Mhm.
Switching gears, because I really could keep you all day, because you have an enthusiasm and just you're such a light. You're really fun to be around, and that's how we
Oh,
when
thanks.
we had you at our retreat. Something I ask everyone is there an experience that happened in your life where when it happened it sucked, was not fun, weren't grateful, but upon reflection you're like, that was a real turning point for me where new opportunities presented, or but you just couldn't see it at the time?
Hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, just in general, you mean, or related to cooking, or well, yeah. So I worked at Canadian Living, and I worked my butt off, like because when I worked at so I worked there in 2018, 2018, and sorry, 2017 to 2018, and so magazine staff was already shrinking at that time. Like it was, everyone could see the writing on the wall. It was like kind of like TV shows, and like there was all this talk about like print publishing, newspapers, magazines, and all that. So when I was there, I was working hard and I was giving it my all, and I took a pay cut to take that job because I was like, this is one of the places I really want to learn and the opportunities that can come from it. And then at the end of that experience, I got laid off because my position was eliminated. And it happened like it was such a strange experience being like so tired from working so hard and doing a good job to just being like, well, so long. Thanks for everything. And so that was really hard. And I had just proposed to my husband. So we had a wedding coming up in like 16 months. That was a DIY wedding. So all of this happened all at once. And I was like, what am I going to do here? Like, so it was sad and it was scary. But I also happened to know a bunch of ex-editors who had similar experiences. They're 6 months or a year or more before, and they had gone freelance. And so I started to reach out and I started to say, well, this has happened and I know that you've gone through this and it sucks, but like, what do I do? And a lot of them said, like, now's the time you should go freelance. And I'm thinking, God, do I go freelance now while I'm trying to save up money for this wedding? Like, I have a mortgage and I don't even know where to begin. But I decided I had some really good people around me just kind of like rooting me on and rooting for me. And I did it. That first year, I think I made like, I don't know the amount of unpaid hours. And I think I earned like $20,000 before taxes in my first year because I was just trying to get people to see me and take a chance on me, whether it was doing some recipe development for some food brands or doing the occasional TV gig. Actually, that first year I did some TV gigs and I had to pay for the food and my parking and all of that. It cost me money to go on these TV shows to share my recipes. But I was like, okay, I'm going to do this because if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do this. And in hindsight, of course, that was like almost 7 years ago. Like, I'm so glad that I did that. And I went through that because it was the beginning of starting a business. And it was painful, but had I not been let go, and there were a few people when I got let go that said, I don't know, I think you should hit the ground running, get into another company. And I was thinking, I just can't swallow that pill right now because I just worked my ass off for a corporation that just cast me aside. And I've seen it happen at other corporate jobs I've had. So I thought, no, this does seem like the time to take a chance. And I'm so glad I did.
I think that's going to speak to the heart of many people. There's nothing more scary than that happening and then going all in on yourself and then to really paint the picture of like what that actually looks like, right? Because I'm sure there were many moments in that first year where you're like, I should have maybe just taken the job, but you can play the tape to the end, like what you've built and what is nothing short of impressive and inspiring. So that's super cool.
Thank you.
That. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, we get it. It is super confusing to figure out how you should be eating, and you've probably been hearing a lot more about increasing your protein consumption. We've got you covered. If you are looking to understand how much protein you might want to consider, then please go check out our calculator. It will help show you what this looks like for your ideal body weight, what that looks like per meal and throughout the day, on days that you're strength training and on days where you're just a normal gal about the town. If you are looking to understand protein a bit better and want to bring that conversation to your regulated healthcare professional, then please go check out our calculator online in the show notes so that you can have a more strategic approach to your nourishment and to your protein levels. Your future self and vibrant energy will thank you. I have some rapid fire questions. Are you ready? What books are currently on your nightstand?
My gosh, I literally have a book on my nightstand. Now I can't remember the name of it. Instead of that, it's all about like organic local flour too. My mom just gave it to me for Christmas, but I haven't cracked it yet. But I'll have to get back to the night. It's like flour is power or something like that. Anyway, okay. That answer, because I don't have that much to say on it yet, but it seems really, really interesting. It's all about like the movement towards small farm flours that are milled locally and not mass produced, and baking with those flours and what a difference it can make in your breads. And but I can gab more about that later.
Yeah, because that's so interesting. I was talking to a girl who's now started making her own sourdough. She just ordered from like a small, local mill, and she's milling it herself. Like she's actually bought an adapter for her KitchenAid where she can actually.
It's so cool. It's so cool. Yeah. So I'm just getting my toes wet in that whole thing. I bet you I will have a little like countertop mill in the next year. It's expensive, but it's worth it.
Okay.
Let's see. Also, not good at rapid fire. No. But let me tell you this. I could talk about a book that is like huge and wonderful, that is indispensable to me. I'm looking at it right now because it's not on my nightstand, but in my kitchen, I have my cookbook library, and it's called The Vegetarian Flavor Bible.
Okay.
So it is a spin-off of a book that's slightly older called The Flavor Bible. So it is, here, let me show it to you. It's right here. It is this wonderful compendium. Basically, it's the result of a survey. So it's called The Vegetarian Flavor Bible. It's the result of a survey that went out to hundreds of chefs and food professionals and basically just asked them. It lists all these different ingredients, like all the ingredients, it's like a dictionary of ingredients, but under each ingredient are all sorts of flavor combos as according to all these chefs and food professionals who responded to this survey. And they're all categorized by how frequently they came up. So if they're in just regular font, they came up somewhat. If they're bold, they came up a little more. If they're in caps, they came up a little more. And if they're in bold caps, they're like undeniably the most like famous or well-known flavor combos. Almost everybody mentioned them in their responses. So whenever you come home, let's say I come home from the farmer's market with apples and I go to the apple section, I can look at 200 ingredients that are like well known to go with apples for various reasons. And it's such a great place to start your ideation for what you're going to cook. This one is the vegetarian version. So it kind of goes in a little more deeply to ingredients that, like, there are more esoteric ingredients in here that may not be as common and didn't appear in the original flavor Bible. That includes meats and cheeses. Actually, this one includes cheeses as well, but doesn't include meats. Either book is really incredible. Can't say enough good things about it. There are all kinds of food stains and stuff on this because I use it all the time.
I'm so glad I asked you that, because that is something that I feel like I need. What is one thing that brings you joy?
One thing that brings me joy: culinary traveling to a destination to explore certainly not just the restaurant scene, but everything to do with food. I'd say culinary focused or food focused travel, which is something I'm kind of getting my toes wet with right now. I'm beginning to do more culinary or foodie tourism content, and I'm writing for Travel Life, which I just went on my first culinary trip to Laredo, Mexico, which is all small area on the Baja California Peninsula. And I went on this trip and I got to, go deep sea fishing where the yellowtail was sliced into sashimi right on the boat, and we ate it there while dolphins were like strolling by. And then I got to go to a ranch, and with a rancher and his wife showed us how to make fresh cheese, and I got to milk a goat, and we made fresh tortillas and had like a traditional rancher's breakfast. And little things like that, like going to these small shops. This is not like a tourist trap kind of place. This is kind of like an untouched old Mexico kind of place where there are cacti that looked like they're out of like a cartoon. And it was so wonderful. And I'm just starting to do more of that. So I think those stories are stories that people want to hear and that they're interested in. And when I go on a trip, I love to just go, and I love to go to a supermarket and like explore that for like an hour, just like poke around and see what's on the shelf there. So yeah, that brings me a lot of joy.
You need a show. That would be so good. But I'll say it like, you're not rapid fire at all, but that's what I like about you. In Spain, when we would find random grocery stores, I love just walking the aisles, and it is very, very enjoyable. So I would watch that show.
Well, I'll be doing it on Instagram and online.
Okay, I will enjoy that. That sounds super amazing. Who do you admire most?
I admire most my mom's. I know it's cliche, but it's true.
That's really sweet. Fill in the blank. Oh, sorry, were you going to say something?
No, this is rapid fire. I don't need to elaborate on everything.
But you're so good at it. Fill in the blank. Community is
everything.
Advice you wish someone gave you 5 years ago.
Be patient and be kinder to yourself.
It's a word to describe you.
Fun.
You are fun. You are fun. You are a delight. I could listen to you all day, and your love of food is palpable. And I am so grateful to have this conversation live on the podcast so that I can direct all of my patients who are so bored and we're all maybe making mediocre meals to refer to fall in love with food, because there's very few things that are as important than nourishing ourselves and enjoying that. Like, we have to eat.
Indeed.
Bring back play and enjoyment. So thanks for breathing life into that. Thanks for being you. I'm so grateful that we had you on a retreat and we got to experience your food at least once in this lifetime. Where can people follow you and connect with you and watch your ongoing journeys with food and travel? Because this is something very exciting and fun.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Anyone can find me on Instagram is where I do most of my posting, on Facebook as well, but mostly Instagram at Paul Lillakas. That's where I share my videos. I share stories, and I will certainly be sharing travel logs of my culinary travels upcoming.
I can't wait. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Wild Medicine. I am so grateful to have you here, and I hope you're feeling inspired and empowered. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. It helps us reach more incredible women just like you. And before you go, quick reminder, the information shared on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat any medical condition. Please consult with your healthcare provider for personalized advice and care. And if you're ready to take inspired action and dive deeper into your own health journey, please visit us at poppyclinic.com. Let's rewild and reset your health together.